What's up, guys? This is Lakhile here. Welcome to the Square Roots podcast, a podcast where young people leading change in STEM. I'm Lakhile. I'm your authentic and fun host of today's episode. And today, this is going to be something very, very special for all of us. I have brought with me one of my best music therapists in my school, and we're going to know about who he is and how he's learned so much within his music journey. And we're just going to have an amazing time. I have brought with me the one, the only, Alphonso. Nice to have you here on the show.
Thank you for such a lovely introduction, and thank you for using my full name as well. I think it's important because when I was a kid, people used to call me Alfie, but that was an Alfie, and they used to think my name was Alfred, and I used to hate that. So and now as a therapist, I think it's really important that, and I think a lot of people, and I don't know if you found this with Keely, but with names that don't sound, English or sound a bit different, sometimes people struggle with names. But I think
I get that a lot.
Do you get that as well? Yeah.
Yeah, I get that a lot, especially with my family. Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. Because your parents are from Swaziland, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you get that. So and I find the same thing. Even though Alfonso is a more kind of European name, people still can spell it with an F or a PH. And I just think it's just important to spend time getting people's names right. It doesn't take long. Even if you have to ask again, I always find it helps you to remember people's names just by asking how it's spelled anyway. Don't you find that yourself? Yeah.
Yeah, I know how that feels. So just to clarify, his name is Alphonso, both with a PH and not with an F. Okay.
That's
Hope
right.
you got that right. Okay. All right. So thank you so much for being on. There's so much that I'd like to talk about.
Okay.
So starting off, I want to know more about who you are and how you've learned so much within your music journey, and especially with the goal of this podcast, where we talk about science, technology, engineering, and maths, which is also known as STEM. I want to talk about how music technology has impacted you in your music career, and how you find it useful here and there, and how other people can learn from using music technology. So, first things first, tell us about your musical journey and your role in the school, and how this whole music career of yours got started. Where did it all start?
Oh, gosh. Well, where did it all start? I think my music career, started really similar to yours, Lakhile, and this is we've never actually spoken about this. I think this might surprise you, but I actually started music in church. And I know that we probably even mentioned it, I'm not going to not mention it about your album. How can we not mention your album later? Yeah. But I know your album, which is My Journey Through Faith. So my journey started in church. So because my parents came from Jamaica. So again, we have similarities there in terms of, parents, coming from another country to the UK. And that was the same for my parents. They came from Jamaica to the UK. And so my connection and their connection was when they moved from Jamaica to the UK, it was the church that was the kind of central contact point. How they would know someone. You had to have an uncle in Derby or London, and in our case, it was family in Nottingham. So my parents came to Nottingham, and that was a whole bunch of church people there. And then I just remember just growing up in church, and there was something that always fascinated me about instruments in church. I always used to try and go and grab a guitar, grab a keyboard. You do the same thing, yeah? And I always wanted to just try out the instrument. In fact, that's what kept me interested in church. So that's how my journey started was, and I think it's very similar to you, wasn't it? Because you were in church, weren't you, as well?
I've also heard many famous artists and musicians that we know today who have grew up in church, and it's quite interesting and surprising that we find out about them because just from where they grew up in, know, somewhere, from the sticks of South Carolina, for example, they may grow up in church there, and it's just amazing how they have such a background. So really inspirational to hear that.
Yeah, that was similar for me.
Yeah.
So I learned piano. So from church I learned to play piano in church, and then my mum, they saw I had a talent for it, and then I went and had piano lessons. But really, I wanted to play the guitar. Actually, I didn't actually want to play the piano first. It was always the guitar. But the church people said, look, get him a piano because it's good to start on the piano. So that's what happened. I went home one day and there was a piano. And then before I knew it, me and two other brothers were going to piano lessons. And then the guitar came a few years later. I just got a guitar from a guy called Brother Anderson. Actually came round and said to my dad he wanted to buy me a guitar. So they took me to town, bought me a guitar. And then I ended up teaching myself guitar and had guitar lessons. And you know what? I actually ended up teaching Brother Anderson to play guitar because I got really good on it. And so they used to get me coming back. And I kind of heard the story with you as well, because you were in school the other day and we were playing this rock tune when we were playing Back in Black. Yeah. And I taught you drums on Back in Black, didn't I?
Yes,
but
you did.
I never actually learned to play it on guitar, but you had. And you were teaching me Back in Black the other day. So this is almost like it's so scary, going right back to how I taught Brother Anderson guitar. Now, roll on many years and you're teaching me to play a track on Back in Black on guitar, which is so cool. So that's how I started with music. So in church, and then I had formal lessons on guitar and piano. And then that's always been part of my life, just growing up, just playing music in bands and now it's part of my work.
Can you also tell us a little bit more about your role here in this school and how you managed to do your job here well?
Well, I started at Ventures Academy back in 2016, and I remember a call from the head, who I knew very well, a guy called Tristan Williams, and he said, "Oh, we've got this really talented pupil, and his name's Lakhile," and that was you.
Yes.
He said, "I want to come and you come and see this kid." He said, "Lakhile," he said, "is amazing on the piano. We think he learns from YouTube, but we don't know how good he is." And so they invited me to come into the school. I remember coming in. I remember meeting you. Honestly, it still never come out of my head. I remember that. You remember? I don't know if you remember me coming into school.
Yeah.
And then you're in a room. There's a keyboard there. They introduced me to you, and then you just started. I asked you to play, and you just started playing. That you were rattling off. So many things. I can remember you doing some Ed Sheeran stuff. You were knocking out. I think it was Thinking Out Loud or something like that. You were playing. All kinds of stuff, and it was like really impressive. But then, so I knew straight away that you were good. But then I said, let me just see musically how good you are. So I came up to the piano and I pressed I don't know, I think it was like B flat. And I said, turn around. Oh, close your eyes. You closed your eyes, and then you pressed B flat, and you went B flat, and then I pressed another note, and you went G, and then I pressed 3 notes, and you went G, F sharp, E flat.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that. And I was pressing all these notes, and you kept naming them. Do you remember doing that? And I went,
I remember.
Wow. And I went,
it will never get old.
I went, wow. And I knew straight away that you had a natural musicality, perfect pitch. And that's how I started at Ventures Academy. So I was coming in to teach you, because I know even though you're learning on YouTube, I just think just some of your fingering wasn't the best. So I remember that's how I started with you. And then we used to have some piano lessons, and eventually I ended up coming around to see you and your mum and just giving you some piano lessons just to help you with a bit more classical fingering and things like that. Yeah. I mean, how did you find that? How did you find that?
Yeah, I must admit, those classical pieces, if you know me very well, and I believe some people might relate to me to this, those who are watching. By the way, those who are watching, make sure, if this podcast is on YouTube, make sure you subscribe, make sure you like, share this with your family and friends. Maybe they would like to watch this, because trust me, this is really good. Anyway, so the classical pieces, for some people might relate. I absolutely suck at reading sheet paper, because I'm more of a ear listening guy. Like, reading paper is pretty much my only weakness when it comes to music. So those are pretty tough. But I'm really starting to learn so much more on piano as well when I especially when I listen to those watch those piano tutorials on YouTube by DPSM.
So, well, in fact, because we talk, just to jump in, because we're talking about technology. Well, what that showed me when I realized how you were learning to play the piano, and it was a combination of YouTube, but then you were looking at all these YouTube videos, but they had that scrolling notes. It's called synesthesia, isn't it?
Yes.
Isn't it? So using that synesthesia. Actually, what that taught me, because I read music, I learned the conventional way, and then when I saw how you were learning using all these scrolling notes on synesthesia, that is the modern way to actually learn music. And you were doing that, you remember that's what you do when you show me, you're in front of your keyboard, and then you open up YouTube, and then you've got all these lessons with all these notes coming down. And I saw you could almost read them as the notes are falling down.
Yeah.
You're reading all that techie stuff. And to me, that was just like information overload in my brain, because I learned to read the dots. So that way of learning is not good for me, because I learned the conventional way. But I can see how a lot of youngsters like you use that technology with, it's a great way, very visual way to learn the notes, so that's a piece of technology there, right from the start. You were using that. That's how you learn, that's how your brain process information, and a lot of information. Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought this up now, because there's so many questions that I want to talk about that relates to music technology. Starting off with, do you think, especially with what we just spoke about, do you think music technology, just technology in general, just makes music easier for you, and especially the way you incorporate it to your music sessions? Do you think technology just makes music more easier for you?
Technology, I mean, it's a game changer for music. I mean, right from what we just talked about, just from a learning point of view, I think what technology brings into music is it brings a more level playing field. It means that more people can get into music, because I think gone are the days when music used to be kind of this really complicated thing to learn. And what it's done is opened up, and people talk about neurodiversity, don't they? And what music has done is given people many other options, many other ways of getting into music. So music doesn't have to be, for example, grabbing if I grab a ukulele and I've got to learn to play this, if I didn't want to do that, I could just go to a keyboard or get a synthesizer, and it makes it easier to learn that instrument using some digital instruments. So I think it's a game changer. I think the technology from a learning perspective, and looking at we're in a school with autism, and I don't think you mind people knowing that that you're a pupil with autism, but I think you're very proud of that, because you wrote a song, didn't you? What was your song called? What's the first song you ever wrote that we recorded?
Even though we have autism, it's also available on all platforms. Go check it out.
Yeah, it's a beautiful song. It's the first song that you wrote, and we actually recorded that song, and we you launched it on Spotify, didn't you? So it's out there now, isn't it?
Yes.
And that song, just really summarizes beautifully, what we were doing, using technology to put the music together. But you're a conventional musician, but you also use a lot of technologies as well. So I think from a technology point of view, there's so many different tools, so many apps that help to simplify music and make it easy for people to access. So if you want to learn to play the cello, for example, but you don't have a cello, you can get like an iPad app called Thumb Jam and have a cello module on there, and just find a little cello that's one finger. So it means that if you've got any kind of disability, for example, you can still access music, or you can use your eyes to trigger something, to play something, so you don't need to use your fingers if you can't use them. So it opens up, and it's a level playing field. It's a level playing field.
I feel like personally for me, music technology has changed a lot, and especially there's this guy that I listen to called Gearbox Arena 96. If you're watching this video,
yes.
shout out to you.
Yes.
I listened to a lot of his covers, and a lot of them involve a lot of orchestral instruments, and just the way you're able to just program those orchestral instruments. Like, even if you can't physically learn the orchestral instruments yourself, like the violin, the brass, even the percussion, like even though like practicing those instruments take a lot of time, like thanks to digital audio workstations, you can just have free access to those programming those MIDI orchestral instruments. Like, the technology for us in terms of music has really changed quite a lot.
Yeah, and in fact, we've kind of jumped a little bit, because you remember when we started, you were working with me, you were on your keyboard, and then I remember saying to you, because I think you really liked the keyboard that I was using. Do you remember what the keyboard was? It was what was it? Well, you got one now, so
a Yamaha DGX 650.
Yeah, exactly, the DGX 650, and you love that keyboard, and so much that I actually recommended to your mum to get you, and you went and, in fact, you went and got the same. You got a better version than me as well.
Yeah, a Yamaha DGX 660.
You went one up from me, so I was a bit disappointed that you went and got a better instrument than me. So your mum bought you, and then from that, you were programming it within all. There's a lot of complicated functions within that keyboard, a lot of technology there. But from that, then I introduced you to recording. Do you remember? Then I remember you recorded one of your gaming songs, and I brought it. I brought my Mac in school. You remember? So I had my Mac, and the Mac was, because you just mentioned the DAW, DAW, the Digital Audio Workstation.
Yeah.
And so we actually used Logic. So I had Logic. That was the DAW that we used, and we had that set up. And then you were playing on the keyboard, and what was the song that you recorded? It was a really heavy metal song. What was it? It's like
can you remember the track? I Ain't Your Savior from Motorstorm. I Ain't
Your Savior. Oh my gosh. That was, and we've got a video that's on the school website still, And so we put this video together of you playing each track. Do you remember that? And I remember the first thing you put down, right? So on the keyboard, you were doing the drums. You were using the drumming on the keyboard, Yeah. And you were drumming for about 3 minutes. You remember? Yeah. And I recorded that first layer, and they said, okay, let's record the next. And I think you said you wanted to record the electric guitar. And I went, no, we're not going to do the. And I said, I want you to record the bass. And you went, no, I want to do the electric guitar. I said, no, do the bass. And the reason I wanted you to do the bass, I'll tell you why, was because I didn't know what you were playing. And I wanted to hear if there was a bass line to go with that rhythm, with the drums. I don't know if you didn't know that. That's why I wanted to hear it. Because as you know, the minute you put bass and drums together, then you know if the person knows what they're doing. So then you put the bass line down, so you're doing all this. And honestly, that was one of the most amazing discoveries. When I realized, I was saying to myself, oh my Lord.
Yeah.
You have in your head, you had a picture of that whole song, but not just the whole song. You had a picture of every single instrument in that song. And that's what we did. And so you remember so you recorded the bass line. And then you went next. I said, what are you gonna do next? And you went guitar. And then you would listen to the track. Then the electric guitar would come in, the lead break would come in, and then you'd put that down. And that was amazing. You did that every single one, first take. Yeah. You went next, no mistakes. And I think we must have recorded about, 9, 10 layers. Can you remember?
That's so many layers we had in.
Yeah, recorded 9, 10 layers. And at that time, I had a video running as well. I just couldn't believe what was happening. So I had the video running. And then we put this video together, and then we released it onto the school YouTube, so that they could, so that the world could see exactly what you could do. And that video is still out there. It's incredible. And that shows you doing all this kind of stuff going on. And then it had you singing as well. You remember you were singing, I ain't your savior. How did it go? How did it go?
Yeah.
Can you remember? Can you remember the song?
Yeah,
Yeah,
go check it out.
yeah.
It's on YouTube, Adventures Academy Bristol. But yeah, that was such an amazing experience. And of course,
Yeah.
I've learned to record bass first, then electric guitar, because drums and bass, they kind of fit together in a way.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's
there's
right.
even a music genre called drum and bass. All right.
Exactly. Yeah.
There's so much that we've talked about. I just want to ask you one more thing. For those who are looking to record music for themselves, what technology would you recommend? Because there's like different versions of digital audio workstations, different kinds of
Yeah.
microphones, different kinds of interfaces, different kinds of
Yeah.
headphones, like Audio
Yeah.
Technicas, also Logic Pro, GarageBand. Like, what would you
Yeah.
recommend to any
Wow.
first timer who's looking to record music?
So, as you said, there's so much out there. Okay.
Yeah,
And my biggest recommendation would be, first of all, know how much money you've got to spend, because you might not have, to get the latest Mac, as you know, and latest keyboard is very expensive. So
right.
depending on your budget, yeah. So that's, I think, the first thing is, buy what you can afford. So it might be that you've got a phone. If you've got a phone, then you can, if it's an iPhone, for example, then you can get, like, GarageBand is free.
Yeah,
That comes as a free app. So you might start with something like a GarageBand, and
yeah,
then you can start with that on your phone or on an iPad to
yeah,
start the recording. So just
yeah,
getting something that suits your budget, and then there's
yeah,
lots of other types of apps that
yeah.
you can
GarageBand is
use
how I
to.
got started.
Yeah, exactly. You start on GarageBand. Then once you've got something like GarageBand, you record a few things, and then you just build up your skills, starting simply like that.
Yeah,
And that's how you started. You was on GarageBand first, you got better, then you
yeah,
went on to Logic, and then you were doing it on your iPad, but then your iPad kept getting overloaded, and then you went and bought a Mac.
yeah.
Your mum invested in a Mac, which
Uh
costs,
huh.
and your setup must be quite a few £1,000s now, but you didn't
Mm,
start like that. You start slowly, what you can
yeah,
afford, and then you just discover lots of other bits of technology as you
yeah,
start to get into the recording.
yeah,
But you can't go wrong with starting something simple like GarageBand, which
yeah,
is free. Yeah, so that's cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much technology out there. And
Mm.
of course, with what you've mentioned as well, to anybody who's watching this right now and who's looking to record music for the very first time, like, be yourself. Start small, because small beginnings lead to bigger things as you progress forward into this music industry. And of course, don't be discouraged. Like, do music that suits you. Like, what kind of genres do you listen to? Me growing up, I used to listen to many different kinds of genres, but of course, I was really into video game soundtracks, and the majority of those video game soundtracks were full of rock and metal. But of course, when I started growing older, for me as a Christian, I started listening to more gospel. So find music that suits you and basically defines who you are. And of course, start off small, especially with your budget. And of course, when you progress, you'll, become very successful, like these artists and people that you listen to on the radio and stuff like that. Trust me, your dream will come true. So yeah, thank you so much for Alfie for coming on. It's truly been an honor to have you here, and of course, especially for this podcast, you've really explained a lot of how music technology really did a lot in our lives, and pretty much did for everybody here. Just changed so much. And I believe, like I said, for any newcomer in music, I feel like music technology is really going to bring the best out of their creative skills, and they can just really just tap into it and, make music out of it. So yeah, I'm absolutely grateful for what you've delivered. Thank you so much to everybody who has been watching this podcast. If you guys enjoyed it, you know the routine. If it's out on YouTube, you know what to do. You know what to do. You know the routine. Like, subscribe, share with your friends, keep those notifications on so you don't miss out. But yeah, it's truly an honor and a privilege to be here. Oh yeah, there's also podcasts available on other platforms too, such as I believe it's called Apple Podcast. I believe there are also podcasts such as Spotify podcast, I believe as well. Yeah, you mentioned Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, YouTube. This pretty much broadcasted all over the world. So yeah, make sure if you can get your notifications on so you can stay tuned for more episodes like this. But yeah, Alfie, I'm so grateful with what you brought here to the table. You know how STEM, science, technology, engineering, and maths just pretty much shows up for everything, even in music. Like, yeah, it shows up everywhere.
It totally. Shows up everywhere. And I'd like to say to you, Lakhile, is, this has been a journey, from 2016 to 2024, and you're now leaving Ventures Academy. So, from me and the rest of the school, good luck. Now you're going on to music college, and you're going to storm it. I think you're going to storm the world as well. So
thank you.
One step at a time. So now you've got music college, and you're going to do amazingly well. And it's been a true blessing to be part of that journey, and it'll never end because I'll track you down and and keep listening. I'm sure you'll be putting the stuff out there, but we'll still be in touch, and it'll be lovely to see how you develop. But it's been an amazing journey, and it's actually so wonderful to be able to do this podcast. So I think we have to wrap now, but wonderful.
Yeah. We'll wrap it up right there. Just one more thing. Go get my album, My Journey Through Faith, available everywhere and now. And that's about it. Thanks again for being on, and I will catch you later in the next episode. God bless you. Bye.